Welcome to the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we slice stigma surrounding mental illness one episode at a time, and we give others courage to do the same. I am your host, Lay, a wife, mom, daughter, sister, coworker, and friend who also lives with bipolar 1 disorder. So, without further ado, let's slay. Dating is hard. And when you throw a mental health diagnosis in the mix, that complicates things even further. Like many of you know, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder at the end of 2017 following a psychotic episode that I had experienced at the beginning of that year. But even prior to getting my diagnosis, I struggled with severe social anxiety, and it was to the point where I could not be around people. I had isolated, just completely taken myself out of the lives of all my friends and loved ones because I couldn't live with myself. I had so much shame and so much guilt and so much negativity just surrounding me and my experience, and I really just embodied that, and I couldn't be around people for the longest time. It took me going to multiple therapists, to doing multiple daily activities and a lot of self-work just to start getting back on my feet. And so when you talk about dating and also having some sort of a mental health challenge, it's like that's the last thing on my mind is like, how can I expect somebody else to understand me when I can hardly understand myself? So I think that is the first piece of advice that I would give to someone with a mental health diagnosis who wants to get back or start getting on the dating scene is to give yourself some grace, firstly, and secondly, to really understand yourself. So I didn't understand bipolar disorder when I got the disorder, even though I had lived it, I had lived through it, survived it. Wouldn't say that I had completely started thriving, but was slowly getting there. But I really had to do the work. So I went to therapy, I got on medication, and I was out of school without a job, without health insurance. I had lost a lot of things, but I eventually did start working again, and I began a new academic program and all that. And once I started being around people, even though that was like one of the hardest things for me to do, and I think it was because I felt sort of like I was hiding myself from people because I had experienced this traumatic event, and now I'm back and like, but I'm not back where I was. So I was living in another state and working on a doctoral degree, and now I'm back at home, and I'm doing something completely different than what I was going to school for. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, what are people thinking about me? Like, are they wondering why I'm back home? Are they wondering what happened in my academic program? Like, are they going to figure me out? Like, are they going to think I'm crazy, that this might happen again? They want nothing to do with me. They don't want to hire me. They don't want to take a chance on me. Just all these narratives kind of circling and going through my head. And it was really a lot. And I just had to really just put one foot in front of the other and try to keep going. But another thing I had to realize is that not everybody deserves to hear your story. You don't have to explain yourself to everybody. Not everybody deserves an explanation, deserves to know why this or why that. You really have to live your life for you and do it in such a way that brings you peace and joy and makes you feel fulfilled. So I started working again, I started meeting new people, and slowly started getting back to myself. And I'm in my late 20s at this point, and I wanted to get on the dating scene, so I did the whole social dating, like the dating apps and all that stuff is how I was meeting people, because a lot of my social networks were in other places at this point. So it was hard to meet people through friends and things like that. So that's how I was meeting people. And, I personally can tell pretty early on whether something's not going to work. and dated a couple of guys like that where I was just like, this isn't going anywhere. Like, there's no reason for me to disclose my diagnosis or divulge any sort of information about my mental illness or the trauma that I experienced or anything like that because this isn't going anywhere. So that doesn't benefit you, that doesn't benefit me, like that there's no point in sharing that information when that is such a vulnerable thing for me to do, and it takes a lot of courage to do it. Like, you just don't share with just anybody. So that would be my next piece of advice, is that you don't have to share your story with everybody. Not everybody deserves to hear it. There's no reason that everybody should hear it unless that's what you want, and unless you have healed to the point where you can do that, and be okay. um, but anyway, I did meet a guy who's now my husband, but I did meet a guy that I was interested in, who was interested in me. And about 3 months in, I had been telling him before the 3 months, but been telling him that there was something I wanted to share if we were going to make our relationship serious and wanted it to be long term. And so about 3 months in, I told him that I had bipolar disorder. And I think it was on a different occasion that I shared with him the psychotic aspect of it, because that is even more vulnerable, even scarier to share with somebody. Like, to tell them that you hear things that other people don't hear, and you saw things that other people didn't see, and you had all these crazy thoughts and delusions and whatnot. They're gonna think you're crazy. They're gonna think you're just playing them, like, oh, she's pretending that she's sane and cool now, but might wake up tomorrow and she's a totally different person. And so just the stigma that's attached with mental illness in general makes it very hard to share. And I self stigmatize, and it's easy to do so. And I understand how it can be easy for someone else to have these negative stereotypes and these negative stigmas towards or about mental health. But I told him, and his response, I think he wasn't expecting to hear that, but it wasn't a turn off. It wasn't hey, I'm out type deal. It was more so like, let me research this, because he loves to research. Let me research this, understand it, get a better idea of what I'm dealing with, see if I think that I am able to be your partner, to support you in this way, in the way that you need me to, and then we can proceed from there. Which I really appreciated that from him, because you don't want to share with somebody something serious or vulnerable about yourself and not be ready for a no, or not be ready for, I don't think I can do this right now. You've got to be ready for whatever the response is. So once you find that you are comfortable enough with a person, you like this person enough, you think that this person is understanding, and you could make this work long term, you have to be ready for what that person has to say back to you once you tell them what you've got going on. And so once I got to that point, that's when I decided I would tell him, like, I'm okay if you don't want to do this. Like, I was okay with that. Like, I wanted it to work, but I would be okay if it didn't. But fortunately for me, it did. And actually, 2 years ago, we were engaged at this point. But 2 years ago, in July of 2021, he actually contributed an article to my blog, thebipolarbuzz.com, which I will put in the description below this video if you would like to go check that out. But he wrote about dating someone with bipolar disorder from the perspective of someone who does not have bipolar disorder or any other mental illness. But a couple of the things that he wrote in there that I think is actually very important for someone who has a mental illness as well, from our perspective, is do your research. So you want to research about your disorder. Like I said, I needed to understand myself, and I couldn't expect somebody else to understand me without my even understanding myself. So do your research about, how different things can trigger episodes, and about how different medications work, different treatments that are available, what you can do to ease your symptoms and to live a more productive life, and one that isn't so effortful. And because I used to struggle with depressive episodes as well. And so it was hard for me to get out of bed some days and to talk to people and to take care of myself. So just read up on that. And then another thing he mentioned in his article is that he read what he read with the knowledge that the people who are writing for these medical websites are professionals. Many of them do not have a lived experience or know someone with a disorder, so they're just writing from their educational and professional standpoint. So you want to be able to compare and say, well, this fits me, but this doesn't. That fits me, but this doesn't. And be able to sort of pick out what resonates with you and figure out how you can work on those things. And then you want to have a plan. So I probably should have done this before I even met my partner, but it was actually his idea for me to create a crisis plan. But basically, it's a living document that helps somebody to help you in your time of crisis or your time of need. So you start by putting your warning signs that something is wrong or you're about to have some sort of a manic or depressive episode. You put different contact information on there for your mental health providers, maybe even your manager if you might miss work because of a mental health crisis, and then different facilities that you wouldn't mind being taken to for treatment, and et cetera, et cetera. I can go on and on about a crisis plan, but um, it's very important to have. And maybe, for someone that you're dating or looking to date long term, you could have a draft of that and share it with them at the right time. And they might even help you work through that draft if they want to, but just kind of give them an idea of what they can expect in the future or how they can help you. That was one thing that my husband did for me, is that he researched so much and asked me so many questions and gave me so many helpful tips and so much helpful advice that I knew that he would be in there for the long run. Um, that he was thinking future and not just now, because I can seem perfectly fine right now, today, and tomorrow something happened that doesn't seem like myself, and you've got to be ready for that. And fortunately for me, I do have a treatment plan, mostly a medication treatment plan, that works for me and keeps me pretty stable most of the time, but not everybody has that, and it's not always going to work 100% of the time. So just to have someone who's able to go through those ebbs and flows with you and who understands that this dating thing isn't just for when you're at your best, but also for when you're at your worst. And how can I help you when you're at your worst, not just be there with you when you're feeling the greatest? So, those are my tidbits and pieces of advice. Um, it's okay to be scared. I'm not going to say don't be scared to share. It's okay to be scared. And I think that's an absolutely normal thing because it's such a vulnerable thing, like I mentioned before, to divulge that sort of information to somebody that you might hardly even know, because you're trusting them not to take that information and harm you with it, either then or at a later time. But so the takeaways are to have or give yourself grace, to understand yourself and your disorder, to be prepared for whatever your partner or your would be partner has to say in response to your sharing your diagnosis. And just remember, not everybody deserves to know what you've been through or what you're going through. And then, fourth, make sure you've got someone who's in it for the long haul. And unfortunately, I don't have any experiences to share about when I've told someone I have this disorder and they rejected me. I wish I did so that I could tell you how I handled it, but I never got to a point in a relationship with anybody else, before my husband, where I thought that that person was the right person to share my diagnosis with. but maybe you do. And if you do and you like to share with me, what your experience was, I would love to hear. I would even share it for you if you would like me to. Just send me a message or you can drop a comment down below. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we have the courage to slay stigma. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe for more and share with a friend.